Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners. This is Allison Levine, and today I am in the beautiful Rita Hills at Melville Winery with the owner and wine grower, Chad Melville. Chad, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us about Melville Winery.
Thank you for having me. Melville Winery is a family operation in the Rita Hills, California. We're 100% estate, which is really what drives us. We own our own land, do all of our own farming, which is really the foundation of who we are. We really kind of see ourselves as wine growers, right? We're farmers first. My family's history is all from farming, and so that's really who we are. Everything's organically farmed. We spend a lot, probably the majority of our time, our effort, our money in the farming side of the business. And in some ways, we're even just really kind of considered farmers that just happen to make wine, really. That's how important it is.
Well, on that note, do you sell any of your fruit, or is it all made for Melville wine?
We keep all of our fruit.
Okay.
We used to sell some in the very beginning, I think, to help establish, our reputation, help kind of with cash flow, and also, just kind of help establish like sales channels, really, in the beginning. So we sold fruit. We don't anymore. It was a really kind of an interesting, fun, helpful opportunity to do that. We basically were in a position where we could hand pick really who we wanted to sell fruit to, and so that was fun because there was relationships there, where you could bounce ideas off of, and I think that's one of the things I love about this industry, period, especially on that side of it, which is, the winemaking, wine growing side, is that the people that I meet that are in this business, generally speaking, are very down to earth, good human beings, and I really appreciated that.
That's great. So now that you don't sell fruit, you have a lot of acres, and I know yields would change year to year, but what's your average, total that you make in wine?
On average right now, it's between like 9 to 11, 12,000 cases. It just kind of depends. I mean, we do, the majority of our vineyard is Pinot Noir, and as you know, Pinot Noir just has low yields, period, right? So it doesn't really translate, acreage to, cases. But I think what's really important when I answer that question, because it's a question that everybody asks, and I think it's an answer that it gives you or the person some kind of judgment on you, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what's really important to recognize is, let's call it 11,000 cases. We make it 100 cases at a time, right? We micro pick our vineyard. Everything's fermented in 1.5 ton open top fermenters, as if we were a tiny little like garagiste wine production, right? I know I used to do that, right? So I think that's really what's important, right? Mm-hmm. It's not the number, out of the 11,000 cases, we make, I don't even know, like when you add it all up, probably 18 different wines.
Wow.
And even then it ranges from like 50 cases to, 150 cases to 300 cases. And then we make our main estate Pinot Noir, which is like probably half of our total production, right? So the answer isn't good enough, right? It needs explanation, because I think that's what's important. It isn't how much you make, right? I think it's more like, how do you make?
Absolutely. So you said that it's predominantly Pinot Noir, and what other grape varieties do you work with?
Chardonnay, which is fascinating out here. Really, truly fascinating. Syrah, equally fascinating. The Syrahs that come out of Rita Hills are just mind-blowing. Yeah. And then we do a little Grenache out here as well. I would say, percentage-wise, Grenache is probably like 1.5% of our vineyard.
Just a teeny
so
tiny
it's kind of crazy to even talk about it, but what's fun about it is that, like Syrah, it's a late ripening grape. It's a grape that you typically find in hot regions. It produces different styles no matter what kind of climate or temperature, soil type that it's in. I love a challenge, and I love learning. And we threw in 3 acres of it like 5 or 6 years ago, and I can tell you, we're still trying to figure it out.
We got a little time. You're early on that. And where are your wines available? Are they available across the country? Are they in international markets? I know people can find them here, of course.
Yeah, we have them in, as far as wholesale goes, certainly, the big states. Obviously, California probably takes, I don't know, maybe half of our wholesale production. California is the biggest one, but we're all over. New York, Florida, Texas, Colorado, Hawaii, DC. All the major markets. And then internationally, we're in Japan and Sweden and Norway and Germany and UK.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, I know that Melville Winery is one of the original wineries here in the Santa Rita Hills. Not the first, but some part of the original kind of the OGs. I'm curious, though, for you, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Like in regards to Santa Rita Hills, or
just wine in general?
Oh, wow. I think that I was lucky to be raised in a wine family. Like my dad is always about education, always about really kind of exposing, I think culture, food, ideas, and I don't remember how old, maybe I was 14 or something. I don't know. It was like freshman year, or I don't know, 8th grade or something. Just being at the table, and my dad and his wife had some friends over for dinner, and I was seated at the table, and I remember them just like being so excited about this bottle that they just opened that I couldn't help but just be like, what is all the excitement, And he's like, you want to try? I'm like, yeah. And so he gave me some in the proper glassware, and I remember smelling it and going, whoa, like this is crazy. I remember it smelled like, leather and like dark cherries, and I was like, this is crazy. I'm like, how does this work? Like, did they put leather and cherries in here, And my dad was like, no, that's the magic, right? And so, I tasted it, and I was like, ugh, this is gross. Remember the first time you had black coffee? It's like, ugh, right? Now that's all I drink is black coffee. But like, wine to a young palate is going to be sour and bitter, right? And that's what it was. And so I was like, not necessarily a great experience in that regard, but it was a great experience in terms of reading the energy of these people being so excited about it, and smelling it was phenomenal. But I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, this is what adults do, and look at how childlike they are about this beverage. And I remember being fascinated by that.
That's amazing. So as a child, your first memory didn't exactly turn you onto wine. But when you talk about how as adults they were so excited about that wine, is there a wine that you remember having that elicited that same excitement from you? One of those aha moment wines? I'm sure you've had a few.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, it's funny because there's been a lot, most recently, man, we were with some really good friends of mine, and who are really into wine, and we had an 04 Loire Corton Charlemagne, and like when I smelled it, I was like, whoa. And then I took a sip of it, and I'm not kidding, but like my upper body got numb. It was like this vibration.
Wow.
And I was like, sometimes like you hear a favorite song or a part of your favorite song, or it's a movie or whatever, and you get the chills. It happens to me all the time, like with music. Like I'll get the chills, and you can't control the chills. Sometimes they're like the back of my left leg, or the front of my right shoulder. You don't know.
And this one just numbed your whole upper body.
It was pretty crazy. And I will never forget that. But I think that going back in like, kind of trying to understand like where the dots connected. For me, it was coming out of college, and we were up in at Dry Creek Vineyards in Sonoma, which is one of the wineries that we sold fruit to back then in the early 90s. And I was with some friends from college, and we were there just to have fun. We weren't really there to be educated, you know. And the winemaker was there. His name was Larry Levine, and Larry was like, "Hey, you guys, come on back to the barrel room. I want to show you something." We're like, "Great, sure, right?" So he dips the thief in the barrel and, you know, pours us. He's like, "That's Merlot from your vineyard." And
this is from the vineyard you guys owned in Napa.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, actually in Sonoma County, but in Knights Valley, right on the border. But that was a moment to me where all this experience that I had in the vineyard with my dad up until that point, and my brother, was all hard work. It was pruning, it was raining, it was sticky, it's dirty, it's sweaty, you know, and it's just like, it's just a lot of hard work. And I didn't really care for that so much as I did, like, you know, it wasn't that rewarding to me back then, right? But I was exposed to it, and I was, you know, in a situation where I was lucky, but I didn't know how lucky I was, right? But when I took a sip of that wine from Larry out of barrel, and he said, "This is your vineyard," and I was, then all of a sudden all these dots connected.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, all that hard work, all that stuff that we've been doing the past 8 years now makes total sense.
And like you can almost taste that work.
Yeah, it was pretty magical, you know. I'll never forget that moment. And that was the moment where I was like, whoa, like I think I want to do this the rest of my life, you know. Wow. And it was still like 3 or 4 years later until I actually dove into the business, because I had to, you know, finish my degree at school, and then I felt obligated really to myself to get a job in that field that I studied, and you know, but yeah, that was the moment really that
set you on
really,
a path.
Yeah.
Well, so if we were to come to your home today, what kind of wines would we find? What do you drink and what do you collect? Is it a lot of local wines? Is it wines from around the world, certain grapes?
I think that, like, it's a really good question, because there's a lot of, for someone like me and you, and the other people that you interview, you know, this is what we do for a living. Like, wine is my life, right? It's not just a beverage that I open up at nighttime and whatever. Like,
you start at 9 a.m.
But I spit, though.
That's true.
So I think that what really, like, for me, I love just a really good wine. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't care where it comes from, who made it, what style, like, you know, like, just really good wine is, and it's a silly, obvious answer, because who's going to say they like bad wine, obviously, right? But I think then if you take that and you kind of then fine tune it a little bit, I love wines that are of delicate, nuanced, like lifted, beautiful, pretty, restrained, kind of elegant, fresh, acidic. You know, not overbearing, you know, with tannin, but still have some strength. I mean, honestly, I love ballerina wines, you know, wines that are graceful and strong at the same time. So
what would that translate to what we would find in your home?
I love parts of Burgundy. I love parts of the Rhone. I love parts of Piedmont. I love you know, dry, good, high quality Riesling, whether that come from Alsace or Germany. I love California, coastal, cold climate wines. Usually that means Pinot Noir, Syrah, and then other parts, like there's some Oregon producers. I mean, when Oregon has good vintages, those wines are smoking. But it's also, you know, it's a complicated question, because if someone just says, "Oh, I love Burgundy," well, there's lots of Burgundy that's not good,
right?
You know, or someone says, "I love California," there's lots of California that's not good, right? So it really is more about the climate, the soil, and then it is about like the style of the wine, you know.
And so in your home, we'll find a lot of cooler climate wines, the ballerina wines. I'm curious, you work a lot with Pinot Noir, but obviously, and stylistically, I understand, because I understand the type of wines you like. I agree. I like those too. But do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
I mean, I don't know, but I mean, if like, no, just because, you know, when you take it from a farming perspective, like nothing is perfect outside, you know? If you take it just purely as a varietal in a bottle, then yeah, there is, you know, there's wines that I've had that are perfect, you know? Right. But, you know, as far as a varietal goes, like, no, because there's just so much stuff that happens outside that's imperfect, you know?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Yeah. No, so if there isn't a such thing as a perfect variety, what do you think about wine critics and scores, how those play in? Because there's always sort of this reaching out for this level of perfection. I know, how do they play a role for you as a winery, but also you as a wine drinker?
I think that they're important, you know. I think that it gives guidance. I think it gives street credibility. I think that, you know, people need to have, you know, a little direction. You can not, you know, you can ignore it if you want to, right? But if you're not sure, just like a movie critic or a food critic, like just because a movie critic doesn't like a movie doesn't mean that you shouldn't go see it, especially if it's, you know, directed by your favorite director or producer or actor, whatever. Like, you're still going to go see it. I think that the critics, you know, are really useful in that regard. You know, do I agree with all of them? Absolutely not. But do I agree with most of them? Yeah, typically. You know, there's times where we've been blessed and lucky. You know, I would also argue that we earn it, but we've gotten really good scores here in our entire existence, and I'm proud of that. Those are, like, we work hard. I don't work hard with that in mind. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not like, ooh, I hope this gets a 97 pointer. Like, that has zero factor into my decision making. But we also do receive good scores. So I think that when people say they don't matter, that usually is coming from someone who's competing with that kind of world, like maybe a sommelier or, you know, another wine educator, because they want their voice to be heard, and so they got to put down someone else's in order to do so. But I think that in the world of wine, scores are really important. I think that the way that they're written is equally important. So it's not just good enough to read a number. You got to read what they say, you know?
And then how that resonates with you. Yeah. So you as a wine drinker, this is a quick fire answer. Red, white, or rosé?
White.
Still or sparkling?
Still.
Oh. Ballerina wines. And then, you know, working with Pinot Noir, well, you're drinking wines from around the world, and you described that you like a style of wines. And I'm wondering how you translate that into food pairing. Do you follow rules when it comes to food pairing? Do you believe in the red wine and meat and white wine and fish and never cross, but then Pinot has flexibility? Or are there tips?
You know me. I rarely follow any rules. Not that I'm some, like, iconoclast, but, like, I love to cook. Cooking to me is another outlet for me, and I love to explore and try, and so I'm just the opposite of rule follower when it comes to food and wine, and I think that that's so much fun. You know, there was a time recently where I did a dinner, and you know, we started with Pinot Noir, you know, and okay, great, like, that's not that, you know, crazy. But then the next course was Chardonnay, and then that's when people were like, wait, what are you doing, you know?
Going backwards.
Yeah. And then it totally worked. We did another dinner, this is years ago, but it was super fun. We had some, like, miso marinated cod, and we dropped a glass of Pinot Noir, you know, right when we dropped the food. And then 5 minutes later, we dropped a glass of Chardonnay. So now you had a dish, and you had both a red and a white. Huh. And people were like, what? And then at the end of it, people were like, oh my God, like, that was so amazing. Like, both wines worked, and it was so great that we guided them with the red first, right? Mm-hmm. And then we said, now try it with the Chardonnay. And so stuff like that, I think, is really, really fun. I mean, there was a time, I mean, when my kids were really little and whatever, just watched the Food Network, and this is back, I don't know, when like Mario Batali did his show and like Alton Brown did his Good Eats show, and like there was, I don't know, I can't remember, a couple other shows where like I just was fascinated by the way they did things. And I think you learn from that, not necessarily like what they're doing, but conceptually, like, ooh, this soy sauce is going to go really well with this citrus, marinade of some sort for this fatty fish,
And then with that, you kind of think about acidity and texture and wine to go with food. So for somebody who hasn't had the privilege to taste Melville wines, which I find hard to believe if you've ever had a Santa Barbara wine, but if they haven't had Melville wines, what do you think they're missing out on?
I think that our approach is really unique, we're not in this category of California, even though, obviously we are based. I literally, own land and farm in California. I was born and raised in California. I'm a proud Californian.
Me too.
Our wines don't necessarily represent what most people would describe as California. The wines are not extracted. They're not oaky. They're not big and rich and full of juicy sunshine, I think that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, like, what we do here and what people would be missing out on is this opportunity to see another side of California, like cold climate for one, restraint for another, and then driven by savory. There's a lot of savoriness that balances out that California sunshine, and most of that, as far as red goes, is coming from the stem inclusion, the whole cluster that we do. We're not the only ones that do it. It's just that we don't use any new wood, right? It's all old oak and whole cluster and lees contact. And those are all efforts to help kind of bring out more savoriness in the wine, which helps in turn balance out or tuck in the fruitiness of it, right? So in a lineup of, like, let's say 20 California Pinot Noirs blind, you would be able to pick out the Melville. Not saying like that would be your favorite one, but you'd be able to pick it out in that it's very distinct.
Yeah, it stands on its own. That's really interesting, and it sounds like there's a lot of texture in the wines. For sure. So now you said you make about 18 different wines on average. And I'm curious, if space aliens were to land on your property right now and come knock on your door, which of your wines would you welcome them with?
Are they friendly?
Sure. I would hope. I hope you don't have a wine you would give to unfriendly aliens.
Well, I don't know. Am I running away, or am I like...
You're welcoming them in with a bottle of Melville.
Okay. I think that, to start with, I would go after our Blanc de Blanc, but that's just such a great... I think it's such a great example of what this area represents, like salty, briny, oceanic, lifted, beautiful, white flower, high acid. It's just, I think, assuming these aliens have dropped other places in the wine world, right? I think
they have palates.
I think they'd be like, whoa, what's going on here?
So you're doing a sparkling wine?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. Love that. So you guys, you planted this vineyard in what year?
This vineyard that we're on right now planted in 98, but the first vineyard we planted in 97.
97. So you have been here 26 some odd years, and obviously your family had vineyards up in Napa, but prior to that. But based here, you took unplanted ground, you put the vines in the ground here, you have watched them grow, you've grown up alongside them. I'm curious. We know that every vintage tells a different story. We've had droughts, we've had a lot of rain, we have different things. But in your years here, do you see more variation or more consistency year to year? What have you sort of seen in the evolution of this vineyard growing up?
I don't know. I would say more consistency. Having said that, this past vintage was the most inconsistent one, right?
With all the rain?
Yeah, well, the rain was more wintertime, but it was really we did get some rain in the harvest, but we're so close to the Pacific Ocean, and it's a cold Pacific Ocean where we are, and which is, true for 3/4 of California. It's funny when people think of California and you're not from California, they think of Baywatch, right? And then, bikinis and skateboards and palm trees, and that's not...
Like, I need a wetsuit to go in the ocean.
Three-quarters of California is a deep, freezing-ass cold ocean with a rocky coast, right? But it's that ocean and our proximity to it that really regulates our situation here. It doesn't mean we don't have curveballs, but the curveballs that we get are pretty manageable, pretty consistent, which also kind of means predictable as well. So I would say that that's one of the benefits here is the consistency. People like to talk about vintage variation in wine conversations, and I get it. But the thing is, when it comes to this area, it's really kind of a boring conversation because we don't have dramatic, impactful things that really thumbprint a vintage, generally speaking. Of course we do, but we don't have like a massive hailstorm in the springtime that reduces our yield by 70% or something like that, right? Right. So I would say it's more consistent, and to be honest, I like it that way. We already take so much risk, I mean, we're positioned uniquely here, right? I mean, we're an estate winery, and of course we're not the only ones, but they're very rare to be 100% estate. We've got 144 planted acres. It's our own crew, our own land. We own it. Well, the bank still owns part of it, but we don't have investors, right? And I think that we have plenty of risk as it is. I'm not looking to make things more complicated than they are, because there's so much that goes into that wine growing. I mean, we're out there, taking leaf blade samples, soil samples, like understanding what's in the soil, what the vine is taking up, how to make those adjustments. We're spoon feeding the vines. Like, we're doing so much out there to like get things perfect, knowing that you can't actually achieve perfection. And then there's the winemaking side of it, right? There's plenty of risk there. Neutral wood, we're using old barrels, like that's crazy, and like, there's just an lees contact without any SO2. So like,
and how much stem inclusion, all these decisions, every little decision you make.
Totally. So if you factor all that in, and then you want to throw in, Mother Nature, like not being, throwing big curveballs at you, then it almost kind of makes it not fun, Right. But we're lucky, we're very respectful, and that's why, to be honest, I use the word or term, wine grower, not winemaker, because Mother Nature is the one that's making it, and we are here lucky and privileged to be able to work with her to get what we're trying to achieve. But she's in charge, Yeah. There's no doubt.
Well, are there any signs or predictors that she gives you that nature will give you to kind of give you an idea of what a harvest is going to be or a vintage is going to be?
All the time. I think that, like, to be a good farmer, no matter what, you have to have lots of knowledge. You have to have the right equipment. You got to be, in the right kind of environment, so soil and climate, right? And you have to have all that stuff, but you also have to have really good timing too, because you can have all the knowledge and then be off with your timing, and you're going to run into problems, right? But the reason, and so how do you get good timing? You get good timing by being observant, by being aware. So the best farmers that I know are farmers that are in tune to what's happening outside, and to be honest, I think that that's really probably the biggest benefit when people are like biodynamic and people are 100% organic. Like they're following the rhythm of what's happening. Today, by the way, is summer solstice, right? Or that's tomorrow, or maybe it's midnight tonight or something. We're really close. But like, it's really interesting. Like, it's a really important part of nature, right? Now the days are slowly going to get shorter. What does that do? It triggers the vines, the birds, the animals. Like, okay, like there's something happening here. Like, we need to stop growing and we need to start focusing on fruit. And so, like, to be aware of all that is really, really important. And Mother Nature guides you. She says, hey, if you pay attention, you will be rewarded, right? But you gotta pay attention.
I like that. And so obviously you pay a lot of attention. You walk through the vineyard, you know these vines pretty intimately.
Yes.
They've grown up with you. And I'm curious, we always hear about winemakers playing music in the winery to inspire the wine, especially in biodynamics and other things. Do you walk through the vineyard and talk to your vines? Do you have communication with the vines, or when they're in barrel, do you talk to the wine?
I don't really talk to the wine, but I'm a big reader of energy, and I don't talk to the vines, but I feel their energy and they feel my energy. I believe in that wholeheartedly. There's the barrel room, there's always music on, and I think that that's really important, for us, it's usually the Grateful Dead, but but that's just because
that's your energy
ever on the planet. But I think it's also mood, right? Because if you are in a good mood, and if good music puts you in a good mood, then it's the same concept of dogs take on the personality of the owner in a way, right? There's a connection there, and I think that's really important, so. Good mood, good vibes, good energy, but that's just also who I am. I'm an optimist, and I think oftentimes my good friends kind of make fun of me actually for being so optimistic, but I'm not naively optimistic, right. But I look at the good, and so for me, I think that's really important, and it has everything to do with who I am and what I do,
And you share that energy with your vines. So with all the years that you guys have been here, has your family, or have you, with the winery, established any sort of traditions or good luck rituals that you do at the start of harvest?
No, we don't. I mean, I love it when people do that.
You don't open one of your Blanc de Blancs?
We don't. It's just, I think that we work hard here, and that's not to say that other people don't. I'm just saying we don't do that. I don't have any cool stories. What we do during harvest though is after we're done with punch downs at 4 a.m., sometime around 5 to 5:30 to 6, we get the soccer ball out on the crush pad and kick it around for 20 minutes, every morning, which is super fun. But that's not really something that, is...
it sounds a little ritualistic if you do that every time. Yeah. So there you go. You talk long enough and you figure out an answer that you didn't think you had.
Totally.
So you said that... you fell in love with wine at a pretty young age, but it was after college and you did some work. But prior to that, what did you want to be when you grew up? Wine wasn't something you knew at 10 or 15.
Oh, when I was that young, I wanted to be a professional quarterback for the LA Rams.
The first time they were in LA.
Yeah, when Pat Hayden was the quarterback way back when. But
are you still a Rams fan?
No, I'm a Niners fan. But when the Rams left, I left too, but I don't know. I think that as I got older, as I was young and grew up, I was very into sports. I was very active as a kid, same with my brother. And I think at some point, I wanted to be... I had an injury in high school, and I thought the rehab part of it was really interesting, fascinating. And so that's what kind of took me down the path of sports medicine. But then admittedly, I don't do well in hospitals and blood. So I quickly learned that may be the wrong path to go down. So ultimately, when I graduated, I was just I was unsatisfied and slightly lost. I think a lot of kids are when they graduate. What do you want to do the rest of your life? How am I supposed to know that?
Right.
But I was lucky to have this opportunity that I have right now. And I knew in my heart, once I made this decision, it was crazy, but I knew that this is what I was gonna do the rest of my life. And I really don't see myself retiring, I think I will always walk vineyards. I will always be involved with winemaking, maybe not punching down all the time and waking up at 3:30 in the morning, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I love this so much, and it's crazy to think about, but like my connection with Mother Nature and like, you know, the ocean growing up, and then, you know, mountains and backpacking, like fly fishing is one of my favorite things to do. It seems like everything I do that brings me joy, it has a connection to Mother Nature. And I just see that as something, you know, that I'll be connected to for the rest of my life. I know that the question was, what was I wanting to do when I was 10?
Well, then my next question, I was then going to ask you what you like to do in your free time, but it sounds like everything's connected to nature.
Yeah, I would, you know, I mean, I still play a lot of tennis, so there's some physical activity for sure, but yes, you know, fly fishing, hiking, mountain biking, you know, live music, all that, you know, that stuff that my kids, you know, I love culture, food, travel, you know, that kind of stuff, for sure.
And you mentioned that you're now a 49ers fan, so I'm curious that if they won the Super Bowl, which of your wines would you want to present to them as a congratulations?
Well, I would be grabbing a bunch of Blanc de Blanc and shaking the shit out of it, spraying it everywhere.
Sure.
Does that count?
That counts. But another wine that you'd want to give them to drink afterwards?
I mean, so the York family, the owners of the Niners, have become friends over the years, and they're big wine lovers, and they're really, really good people.
So they've drunk your wine.
Yeah. And what's fun is Dr. John York is, he's a big Pinot guy and loves Chardonnay too, but what's been fun lately is getting his head around cold climate Syrah. So that would have to be it, you know. They would be like, hey John, let's pop open a bottle of this cold climate Syrah, and, you know, just to have fun.
It's not often that I ask someone if their favorite team won, what wine would they give, and you'd say, oh, I already drink with the owner.
Let's hope they win.
So when you have a free evening and you're planning a romantic evening for you and your partner, I'm curious what kind of wines set the mood. What do you like to open that is not just an average night? That,
you know, is really interesting. I mean, it really comes from what food we're cooking, right? And so.
But you don't follow any rules, so.
I don't follow any rules, but I mean, my general rule is if it's garlicky and tomatoey, you know, it's going to be more of like Barolo-y, you know? I just made up a word.
Barolo-y and garlicky.
Yeah. But I don't typically eat like really heavy food, you know? I mean, I don't mind it. I like to eat a little bit lighter, you know. There's always veggies, and then there's either, you know, fish or meat, but like it just kind of depends. But that's what drives the wine decision. I would say during COVID, you know, those moments of, you know, reaching for like the really special wines became more and more because we all thought we were going to die, and so we're like, what good is this wine
if it sits in a cellar?
If it sits here and I don't get to drink it, right? I also hang out with very passionate wine people, whether they be chefs or winemakers or, you know, some wine collectors even. But like, so those nights are really fun, you know, because it's such a privilege to be able to try stuff like that 04 Loire, right? You're just like, I can't afford that bottle, and it really kind of changed my life in a way, you know? And so those moments are awesome.
It numbed your upper body.
It numbed my upper body.
So when you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
I think that organic farming is really difficult to do, period. And when you do it for 144 acres, it's even harder to do. And I'm very proud of that. I think that also, you know, like our winery is, you know, we're successful, you know, we've got a great reputation, you know, we're profitable, like it's hard to do, you know, and I think like from my dad's leadership, his vision, it's also, I'm very proud to have a team here that is thrilled to work here. That means a lot to me, you know, and so I think that, you know, if you combo all of that, it's really kind of, that's the foundation of it. I mean, there's little moments like, this was a long time ago, but, Winston Rodney, who's the lead singer for Burning Spear, he had some Melville Pinot, and this is when they came through Santa Barbara in like the early 2000s, and he was at a restaurant where a buddy of mine owned it. He was the chef, and he told me that he loved the wine, and it's like that's a fun little thing for me because I have so much respect for him and that band, and like the fact that he loved a wine that I helped create was like, oh my God, that's so cool, right? But that's not the foundation of it, right? The foundation is organic, good team, having a successful business,
Yeah. But speaking of people drinking your wine, I mean, obviously, if you're drinking with the owner of the 49ers and bands are drinking your wine in restaurants, lots of great people have had your wine. But we're sitting at a table, there's a bottle of wine on the table, and an empty seat next to you. Who from any walk of life, living or deceased, would you want to share a bottle of Melville wine with?
Ooh, that's good. Well, I mean, a couple, like the Dalai Lama comes to mind, but he doesn't drink, so that would be weird. But I mean, like Jerry Garcia for sure. Is it just one seat?
No, we have a few extra seats. Okay. It's a bottle of wine. It depends on how many glasses you want.
Well, I think Jerry and I would have fun drinking just one bottle, splitting it. But I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, that's what's great about wine, right? Is that you can like it opens you up. It relaxes you. It like brings stuff out. It's like such an amazing beverage. I think that with Jerry Garcia, that would just be fun, right? Mm-hmm. To hear stories and talk. But as far as like someone who could really kind of, get into wine and have a conversation that was just purely about wine, there's some winemakers out there, like Lalu would be awesome, amazing to sit down with and share wine and just like understand like the story and the intent and all that, behind that would be really fascinating.
I love that. So complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
Not wearing any clothes. Naked.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Oh.
You mentioned that I know that your father set a really sort of standards with how, and ethics and how you worked. And there's a lot of advice that we get over the years. Is there a piece of advice maybe your dad gave you or maybe a mentor or teacher along the way that really guides you in either your life or maybe how you approach wine?
Yeah, I think that the first thing that comes to mind is my dad, and he, there was, it was really about, connecting to Mother Nature. So in 98, we had massive rains, and the vineyard here was not established. So we had planted, but we barely had a cover crop. The vines were, had a tiny little root system. In other words, we were really exposed to all this rain, and we started like losing land. There was so much water coming through the property that I was out there, with my rain gear and a shovel and sandbags, and I was like trying to redirect this water, and it was flowing fast. Mm-hmm. And I was really frustrated. I was scared. I was like, working my butt off to, help and stop and whatever, redirect. And my dad, he was like, he came out there and I'm like, grab a shovel, and he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm trying to save this fucking place. What are you doing, And he basically was like, you got to let it go. He's like, you got to embrace it. You got to actually take a step back and look at the beauty of what's happening right now. And I was like, whoa, and what he was saying was like, this is not under your control. And when you come with two things that are completely out of your control, the best thing to do is to lean into it, right? It's just like every time I land in a plane, instead of like being nervous and all on edge, I actually close my eyes and I sink into my seat a little bit and I try to feel the wheels, like which one touches first, I can't do anything about the landing, right? And the landing is usually like the scariest part, right? And so for me, it's like, well, just embrace it, like learn it and lean into it. And I think that was really important that my dad told me that back then, and at that stage in my career. And so it really allowed me to kind of see like the power of Mother Nature in a different way.
Love that. Well, we've been talking for a while. A few more questions.
Am I going to ask you questions?
You don't get to ask me any questions. Offline. You've talked a lot about music. I know you're a huge Grateful Dead fan. We always love to play a game on this podcast where we pair wine with music, pair your wines with music, because as you said, music makes you feel a certain way. You said that a little bit ago, and I know wine makes us feel a certain way. So if you were going to pair your wine, the emotion a certain wine does. So let's start with your Blanc de Blanc. You can give me a specific song, an artist, a genre, whatever you want, but what does the Blanc de Blanc remind you of?
Ooh, like for Grateful Dead in terms of Grateful Dead?
If you want to go all Grateful Dead, you can, but if you want to go out...
Blanc de Blanc reminds me of like, probably... The first line that comes to mind is Eyes of the World by the Grateful Dead. It's really pretty, it's lifted, it's kind of like fun, kind of dance in your head kind of music, you know, which is what kind of makes me do when I drink Blanc de Blanc.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, how about your estate Chardonnay?
Well, the estate Chardonnay is so unique. It has this ability to be restrained, you know, high acid and also dense with fruit, and then it has a lot of, you know, like salty, briny character to it with like this kind of dried pineapple California sunshine.
God, you're making me hungry.
Well, it's like, I mean, the Santa Rita Hills Chardonnays are and not just Melville, I'm just saying like the area, like they're phenomenal. And yeah. I think that there's a huge future for them. But as far as pairing music with that, I don't know, maybe maybe Jack Straw. You know, Grateful Dead song, Jack Straw.
And your estate Pinot Noir. I know you make a lot of, you know, single or smaller lot Pinot, but let's go with the estate.
Well, the estate Pinot Noir, it's funny because as far as the music analogy goes, I always I kind of think of it like an orchestra, right? Because it has 17 different clones. You know, you have all like the picking parameters, like from harvest. You know, I'll start early, you know, so kind of less ripe, destemmed fruit that really represents like a high, you know, lifted, acidic kind of, you know, component to the orchestra, if you will. And then as things ripen up, then we start to, you know, include more and more whole cluster. And then, you know, Pinot Noir harvest for us here is like 7 or 8 weeks long, right? And so at the end of Pinot harvest, you're talking about like deep, bassier tones and fruit flavors and, you know, full on whole cluster, right? So you put the whole thing on stage and it like kind of represents this orchestra. So I don't know. I mean, like as far as a song goes for that, this is a good question. I would say probably Terrapin Station, just because there's so much involved in that song and there's an orchestral part to it, I think.
I'm loving this. Someone pairing all their wines with Grateful Dead. Never happened before. Okay, last wine, your Syrah.
Syrah it's fun. It's unique because you don't find a lot of really true cold climate Syrah out there. And this stuff's planted right next to our Pinot Noir. We don't pick Syrah here until the middle of November, which is quite late. And there's a lot of risk involved there. And you got to farm Syrah, you know, in a cold climate, because if you don't, it's never going to get ripe. So you got to do a lot of work to it. And we learned this early on. But Syrah, when you do it right in a cold climate, it is mesmerizing. It's like just fascinating because it's like taking this grape that's known to be, you know, dark and tannic and rich and bold and big and masculine and kind of like turning it down in volume. So now you can actually hear the delicateness of it without by turning it down, right? Now you can, it's like this light in your face, it's diminished. And now you can see things behind it, right? That were already there, but you couldn't see them because it was so bright or so loud, right?
Great descriptors.
I think that Althea would be the song to pair with Syrah. I don't know why, really. Maybe there's the same letters, number of letters in each of them, but Althea, when I think of Althea, I just think of purple, and I think of Syrah, I think of purple. So I don't know why, but that's the song.
I love it. Great descriptors. Wow. Okay, well, we've come to the end, and I just have one final kind of two-part question.
So is it two questions?
It's two questions, but they're related. The first one is, what winemaking region in the world is at the top of your bucket list to go explore?
That I haven't explored yet?
Sure. It's at the top of your bucket list, so I don't know if that means repeating or new.
That's a good question. I mean, I've been to almost all the places that I've wanted to go to in terms of, wine travel. And I go back even too, right? I love doing that because I love culture. I love food. I love how, other regions translate all of that. I think that's so important. It's like when people come here, the wine list, should be local because people come here to drink what's here. Right. People come here to eat what's here. So
that's that's the second part of the question.
Oh, okay.
So the first is where you want to go.
Oh, okay. I went to, admittedly, to Piemonte for the first time last year, and I've been wanting to go there forever, and I finally went, and that was really, really fantastic. And I only just skimmed the surface of it, so I want to go back, and I want to go back for a while, and I want to go back in a different way. I want to go back and just kind of tuck in and really, explore a lot more, because there's just something about that area that it's the food, the cheeses, it's the climate, it's those wines, it's just fascinating.
Yeah, well, you definitely get the food, the wine, the combination, absolutely. So the second part of the question is, if people want to come visit you here, where can they find you? What will they find? Tell us about Melville.
Here at the winery.
Sure.
Well, it depends. I mean, I'm here Monday through Friday usually. It's funny, I get friends that'll like text me on a Saturday and be like, "Hey, we're coming up. Are you at the winery?" It's like, no, fuckhead. Like, I don't work on the weekends, just like you.
Maybe not specifically come Monday through Friday. You might meet Chad, but you can come to Melville.
We're open every day, Monday through Sunday, from 11 to 4.
Really? You're open 7 days a week?
We're open 7 days a week. On Fridays and Saturdays, we're open till 5. The rest of the days, we're open till 4. But we're open every day. And there's a really beautiful setting here. It's all outdoors. You can be indoors if you'd like. But it's just, there's a really special thing. I think when you kind of turn into the driveway, it kind of sets the tone. You see how beautiful the building is. This beautiful lawn, antique, outdoor furniture, shade or no shade. There's some pergolas. I mean, there's a really, and our hospitality, we work so hard on. We train our staff with education. Take them out to the vineyard for an hour, and then take them into the cellar for an hour. And we do that the first 6 months of the year. And so the point is, we've got knowledgeable staff. They all just passed their WSET 1.
Wow.
They are very good at hospitality. They love it here. It's a really fun experience. And we do that all by design, right? Because I've been to lots of wine tasting rooms throughout my years, and especially when I was younger, and I was, I treated, a lot differently than I like to be treated, and
absolutely.
And we're very conscious of that, and so we pride ourselves on our hospitality, the beautiful environment, and we're open every day.
That's great, and for the Santa Barbara, San Ynez Valley, it's very common to go to tasting rooms. Not a lot of people have the ability to invite you to their estate. It's just sort of the limitations of this area. And so coming to Melville, you actually get to come onto the property, to the estate property, into the winery, It's a beautiful property. And Chad, thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack. And now you've made me so thirsty. Let's go drink some wine.
Okay, let's go. Oh, also we have a taste room in Santa Barbara in the Funk Zone too.
Oh, so if you can't make it up to wine country, you can just go down to Santa Barbara.
The hours there are like 12 to 8, so it's a little bit different. It's more like a tasting lounge, right? But yes, let's go drink some wine.
Let's go.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.